All right, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our Saturday AI OER Institute. Today, we are joined by two people from Clearbox. We have Victoria Brame and Chris Macek. They're going to talk to us about beyond the disclosure statement, attributing human AI contribution in shared work. And they're going to be talking about something cool called DARP that I found out about through talking with them. So I'm going to let them explain everything. Victoria and Chris, take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Ronald. And welcome everybody to Beyond the Disclosure Statement, Attributing Human AI Contribution and Shared Work. We're so glad that you could join us today. Chris is going to drop a link to our session resources in chat. And as I mentioned, you should be seeing two tabs at the top of your Zoom window. One should be my screen share of the presentation, and Chris has a screen share for when we'll work with local AI. And if you just joined us, please use the chat to describe a piece of work you collaborated on or contributed to this week, and we'll circle back to these a little bit later.
Just getting this link in chat real quick. Are available here. All right.
Awesome. And just starting off with a little bit about us, some of you might know me from my part-time role at the Rebus Foundation. I think I see some familiar Rebus faces in the room. And during the rest of the day, I'm in co-founder mode for Clearbox. Before Rebus and Clearbox, I worked in K-12 for nearly a decade as a middle school teacher and high school administrator, and later as a college librarian for 2.5 years, where I championed open education across my campus, district, region, and state. Building programs, funding, and community around making course materials more affordable for students. I've always held the firm belief, and I think Chris would agree as well, that access to knowledge should not be fenced off by paywalls or paid for with personal data, which drives a lot of our work at Clearbox, building open source, local first tools for self-empowerment. And the librarian in me is thinking about these open tools in terms of information literacy and attribution in the age of AI.
Very, very impressive. Hi, I'm Chris. I am Victoria's husband. And I too went to college for a little bit. And then I started a recording studio in 2005. I do share Victoria's passion for open education. And for me, it comes with an emphasis on trying to figure out how to reach more hands-on, non-traditional learners or other autodidacts like myself. Because while Victoria thrived in a classroom, I've learned to be making mistakes and doing. By running a recording studio, I had to constantly be learning something new. First off, audio engineering, obviously. But I also had to teach myself studio design and room acoustics with CAD. After that, our computers had to be built and networked as data itself became the audio in our deliverable product. New audio engineers needed training and curriculum developed, not just on audio, but how to wear the many hats needed to facilitate and be at the center of the creative process. Then there were the skills I had to pick up to keep pace with the artists who were growing with me. An indie darling like Toby Wigway is a great example. I worked with him from his first studio session through his Grammy nomination. As he got better and more popular, the scope of my work had to keep up. His song On My Soul, featuring Nas, runs the credits for the movie Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. So for that, I had to teach myself how to mix in spatial audio and Dolby Atmos to deliver for motion picture. And even past the music business, we've had to learn to deliver for audiobooks, Audible, TV shows for Discovery Channel, and the exact delivery specifications for every major label. They're all different for no reason. So with all of that being said, after 20 years of facilitating professional creativity, I find myself once again asking, what have I learned? Well, for today's presentation, two lessons really stood out. All right. One, creatives will always use a new technology if it helps their craft. I've watched analog tape become data in a computer where suddenly you could edit and copy in seconds what used to take hours of fine razor blade work on tape. And people said editing digitally in a computer meant it wasn't real anymore. Well, creatives flocked to the flexibility of digital. Then we had autotune, and we had to ask if the performance even matters if we're correcting the pitch. And then entire new genres of music were born. And now we're sitting here with AI. And I'll share a little story that one of my engineers told me about. This is actually from 3 months ago. There's an artist, and I will call him Five Dimes. He was pretty big back in the day in the club. So he's in a session with my engineer, Nathan, and they're cutting verses on a song, and it has a male soul singer on the chorus. And Five Dimes says to my engineer and says, "Hey, you know who that is?" And the engineer's like, "Nah, I'm figuring that maybe it's just a big name he can't place." And Five Dimes says, "That's me." Nathan says, "No, man, that's definitely not your voice." "Sure it is." And Five Dimes pulls out his phone, and he has an app called Suno AI, and it's an AI music app. And Five Dimes had the melody and the lyrics in his head. He sang it into his phone as best he could, and Suno handed him back a polished professional voice. Now, let's be clear. That AI take did not make it into the final released version of the song. He had a real singer come in and they re-recorded the part later. But Five Dimes never had to burn an entire day trying to get another person to deliver the idea in his head. He worked with AI until it was good enough to hand to a real singer and got something way truer to his original vision. Creatives will always choose the tool that enhances their craft and their creativity. And number two, I have found during my work that there are 4 layers of contribution that are present in every creative, shareable work. And I've lived it over and over in every field that's come through the studio. So, what do these 4 layers actually look like? Well, in the studio, they look like this. My title and my job never changed. I'm an audio engineer. However, the actual work that I would perform could change minute to minute, artist to artist, or session to session. For instance, let's say an artist shows up with no real direction. They just maybe have a melody or some lyric that's sticking in their head. All of a sudden, I'm pulling out loops and we're trying to figure out what is even the genre that we're making. That's Devise. Let's say a vocalist gets stuck on the last bar of a verse. And so I had to go ahead and I would build some epic climactic end of verse vocal effect. That's making something that didn't actually exist before. That's going to be author. And by the way, some of the coolest effects you hear in songs really just happen because someone had writer's block. And then let's say an artist brings in a mix they've been working on at home. And they're like, "Man, I really like this. I just want it to be like this, but a little bit better." Okay, I need to work white glove, very small procedural changes. And that's going to be me working in the review layer, correcting things rather than making something new. And then the final task, that's going to be prepare. When I serve the role as a mastering engineer, I am the last hands on the project, and I make sure that the artist's work can translate. The file that leaves my computer is the same one that'll be listened to on millions of others' devices, so it has to be perfect. Can be a little nerve-wracking. So the same chair, same job title as audio engineer, but 4 layers, and you have to learn to feel exactly the moment or the work or the person that you're working with needs. And it was never just music, the audiobook, the TV episode, the film cue, different fields, but the same 4 kinds of work abstracted every time. So we didn't invent these layers. We just wrote down what was already happening everywhere work gets made. And that can change how we credit work by what somebody actually did instead of by their job title. This also means that any field, one shared shape gets everybody on the same page. That's something a disclosure statement was never built to give us. And we'll talk more about that a little later.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And just a reminder for the audience, you may be seeing 2 tabs at the top of your Zoom window. I think some folks have not been able to locate the presentation. So switch over to the tab that's for my screen and let us know if you're still having trouble seeing it. We can maybe stop sharing the other.
I went ahead and stopped sharing the other. We will reshare
Okay,
when it is time.
sounds good. So the 4 layers that Chris just walked you through, devise, author, review, and prepare, sit at the top of the attribution framework. And the idea underneath all of it is that DARP acknowledges the act of a contribution, not your job title, not the work as a whole. What was the act contributed to the work? You already heard it in Chris's studio. His title never changed, but his acts changed minute to minute. And just like Chris in a recording session, any contributor can add to the same work in multiple ways, and DARP can credit every one of them. So beneath the layers, the acts are a proposed set of abstracted actions someone, human or AI, takes at any point in working on a shared work. And the trade words below that are each field's own words for those acts. They frame the layers in a real world walkable taxonomy, and they're how DARP can be crosswalked to most of the standards in use today, many of which don't currently account for AI use. A DARP record can notate human contributions, AI contributions, or both, and it attributes a contribution as broadly or as specifically as the people using it see fit, from the work as a whole all the way down to a single line. Today, we're staying practical, working in those first two levels together. And as we go, keep thinking about how this applies to the piece of work that you shared earlier in chat.
So why are Victoria and I here talking with you today about DARP and attribution? Our company is Clearbox, and we're building local first AI tools. Like pretty much everybody else, I do use cloud AI models, and I've had what they say is true one day completely change to the next day. Workflows that ran clean one week start failing the next because a model got updated somewhere upstream and I can't see what changed. And you can't really build real work on top of that. So we've been thinking local. Common Llama, which is a memory layer on top of Llama CPP, is our engine. You set up AI once for a job with the exact material the job needs, save that setup, and load the same one every time after. And Common Frame is the framework wrapped around it, where you build your own AI-powered workflows and apps where you can prove they actually do what you think they do, and then run all of it on your own hardware, which is really neat because it means that the data is going to be GDPR compliant as well as HIPAA and FERPA because nothing ever leaves your machine and all of the tools are open. So the minute that you're building workflows like that, humans and AI working on the same material, you've hit the attribution problem. While a pipeline is replicable, it doesn't write your AI disclosure. And this is why DARP has to be two halves of one coin, two levels of specificity. Practical DARP is the everyday half. Think of it like an analog record, pencil writable, about the work as a whole. And that's going to be what we're going to be writing and learning today. Now, on the other half, we have technical DARP, which is the digital half. And this can provide provenance down to the character if we need. And this is where it gets interesting. Because imagine if your record was carried inside the work itself. Provenance tokens wrapped around the actual text. That's the OER remixing story that we're trying to build. You adapt a passage out of an open chapter and its credit travels with it. Every contributor, human or AI, with down to the character provenance, into your adaptation and into the OER the next practitioner reuses after that. I think that's pretty exciting stuff, but I'm also kind of a nerd. So let's focus on practical DARP for now, and let's actually see how it works. And to that end, Victoria and I have prepared a very special performance for you today.
All right, get into my acting mode. Hey, Chris, have you ever heard of a monostick?
Monostick? Oh, isn't that what Odysseus and his men poked the Cyclops with? No. Okay. Well, what is it?
Well, it's a one-line poem, and I think it'll be perfect to illustrate the DARP layers. Will you help me make one?
Sure. What should I make it about?
Can you make us a monostick about Nolan's, Homer's, the Odyssey?
Yeah, let's go with that. Okay. Odysseus was lost in the Mediterranean for 10 years, and Nolan got him home in about 3 hours.
Close, but let me tighten it a little bit.
Okay.
How about
please.
10 years lost at sea, 3 hours in IMAX?
Oh, that's better and more accurate.
Awesome. And let's
right.
share it. I'm sharing it in the chat right now so that everybody else has our final draft of our monostick.
Thank you. Thank you.
And scene.
Thank you.
Award-winning performance, clearly. All right. So that was more than just a great piece of theater. You just watched every layer of DARP happen in about 60 seconds. So let's replay it. I had the idea and picked the topic. That's devise, deciding what to make. Chris made the line, it didn't exist, and then it did. That's author, making the work exist.
My very first DARP credit.
Woohoo! Congratulations, earned. I reviewed Chris's line and revised it or tightened it. Nothing was wrong with his line. This is art, so that was taste, right? But the work got better for it. That's review. And I shared it in the chat where you all can reach it. That's prepare. Getting the work out and keeping it reachable. Again, we propose that any shared work can be attributed by these 4 layers of contribution. And notice you can't really take one away. If nobody devises, the work never exists as an idea.
In film, that could look like a director setting the look before a frame is shot.
Right. And if nobody authors, there's nothing. The reporter writing the story, the vocalist singing the take. And if nobody reviews, that work stays a first draft. Peer review lives in this layer.
So would the newsroom fact checker.
And if nobody prepares it, it never reaches you at all. Shareable means somebody prepared it. The mastering engineer, the publisher, and the archivist, keeping it findable 10 years later. Now, even a simple one-line poem still needed all 4 layers. So think about the piece of work you shared in chat before we started. Every one of them probably covers the 4 layers in it somewhere. I'm thinking about, I think somebody posted that they were working on a blog post and there had to be an idea for the blog post itself. Somebody who's writing the blog post, whether it be one author, multiple authors, again, it could be all human, AI, mix of both. Somebody's eventually going to have to.
Illustrations.
Yep. Reviewing what you made and eventually putting it out there. Like, layers kind of apply regardless of the format to any creative work, again, that you share. All right. And to explore DARP further, let's try making something together. We'll start with a baby haiku, 3-5-3 form. For all my purists out there, we will do a 5-7-5 next. And as we create, please participate freely and try to push the concept of the layers that we introduced just to the back of your mind. We don't want to think about those as we're making. We'll attribute contributions once the thing is made. And so first, does anybody have an idea for the topic? Drop it in chat. It can be anything. Our haiku does not have to be an incredible work of art, just a little baby one.
I mean, it could be the next epic. You don't know.
Oscar-winning performances as a topic from Christine.
Ooh, okay. It's a heavy one. Yeah, Oscar.
My grandson's new bike. AI and OER. Gen I and education.
So I don't know. It seems like we're getting the education topics here. So I don't know. Let's go with the Gen AI and education. Although breakfast, man, I did skip breakfast today. That's gnawing on me. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's.
All right, yeah, let's go with that one from Shelley, Gen AI and education. Now, does anybody with that topic have suggestions for the haiku itself? You're welcome to contribute one line or the entire poem. And remember, we're doing 3-5-3 right now. Equity, that's a 3-syllable.
Equity, to make everyone hungry. That's 6. Equity, let's see. Need Gen AI. So.
We're hard at work as well.
Maybe something like AI writes.
Yeah, it's like AIOER is 5.
AIOER. Yep. Okay.
Transparent. Okay. I like transparent. Yep. Transparent AIOER. Do we have a closing line? 3 syllables.
Transparent.
Okay, inclusive, that would work. And again, it does not need to be beautiful. We're just making a functional haiku for the purposes of teaching DARP. And we're going to keep it simple, just saying that we're authoring as a group. Do we have a complete haiku yet, Chris?
What was the final 3-syllable line we were considering?
I think we let's see, I saw we had inclusive, and then I've seen ownership, and Ronald says he likes ownership. So let's say transparent, AI, OER, ownership. Perfect.
Okay. I will go into the chat now.
And actually, as we're doing that, let's just double check our work as a group. If you can review the haiku that Chris is dropping, or are you dropping in chat? I think so.
Yep. Yes, yep.
If you'll review the haiku, and just if we can all agree, is this a valid 353 haiku? So just double check the syllables, and you can give us a thumbs up if we think as a group it is a valid 353 haiku. Thumbs down if we haven't met the format. Seeing some thumbs up.
I will give a thumbs up on that. So let me go back through, and we need to get our.
All right. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. So I will say then this is official, and Chris has already shared haiku in chat. We didn't need to make any changes. We did our thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, so let's actually now reflect and attribute our contributors using DARP. This is a pretty simple crediting task, so we'll stay right at the top DARP layers. Yes, and Mark would have gotten a corrected. Mark actually corrected our spelling, so we might have to give credit when we get to that that layer.
I'm an audio guy. I need spell check. Sorry.
All right, so who came up with the topic for our haiku again?
That would be Shelley.
Okay, so Shelley would be our topic contributor, who we would attribute at the Devise layer here. We could technically credit Chris and myself here as well for originating and shaping the exercise, but those words dip deeper into the taxonomy, so we'll just keep it simple for now and just credit Shelley here. And then we wrote our haiku as a group. We could attribute the different lines that people suggested, but again, we're just trying to keep it simple for the purposes of teaching this. So DARP can be an individual or a group, an organization. Any of those can hold credit just like a person can, a class, a committee, a room full of attendees for a conference session. And then who checked it? We did, again, as a group. By checking the number of syllables. And I might also add that I think Mark also checked us on the spelling of our haiku. So we could give Mark an individual credit there as well. And then who got the work out and shared it in chat? That would be Chris. He gets a credit at the prepare layer. So there it is, our all human DARP record, 4 layers made in just a few minutes. But what happens when we remix a work or get AI involved?
Well, first off, we'll notice that just like with AI, humans can absolutely make easy mistakes too. So next we're going to actually move to remix our haiku, except we're going to use AI. That's the goal. And this may actually be the most common creative AI task on earth right now. Use AI to adapt this passage. Everyone uses it all the time. So we're going to do it. We're going to credit it the way that I would want you armed to be able to do it Monday morning. But before we touch our poem, let's get clear on what a remix actually is, because how you see the remix defines how you would credit it. And so there's no better story to think that through with than the most remixed story of all time, theme, the Odyssey. 3,000 years of retellings, translations, stage plays, novels, a movie every generation. The newest one just landed last month. It's pretty good. The Odyssey. Video 2026. The record that you see here for the credits is going to be wildly simplified. The real credits carry many, many more. But in this stripped down example, you'll see Christopher Nolan wrote it and directed it. Jennifer Lame edited it. Universal put it in front of the world. That movie directly remade the epic. So its record points home with one line at the bottom, based on the Odyssey. Text and our best guess of about 700 BC. So you can have the same title 2 weeks, but the media format and the date do the telling. Notice what that line does not carry, though. No names, no credit. It links the work. And we expect that work to carry its own contributors, just one hop away from this record. If you want to describe the source in more detail, that's a citation, a tried and true mechanism that DARP adds to. It doesn't replace it. And if you want to make that link stronger, you can. DARP has escape hatches, and in this case, we have what's called our pin. And the pin slot is intentionally left open as an open schema. Any provenance scheme your field already trusts can ride there. In this case, it could be a DOI, an ISRC, a tassel, or even a hash, which is just a fingerprint of the exact bytes. Now, the original 3,000-year-old epic does not have a DOI, so we made a fake one. But either way, we'd love to hear what your field might need from this so we can codify it in DARP. That's kind of why we're here today looking for new ideas.
And notice that the work, our monostick, is not a remix. That poem was inspired by the movie. It jokes about the runtime, which is a fact about the film. Nothing from the film is actually in our poem. Inspired by is not based on. If you want to acknowledge an influence, that's what citations are for. So that begs the question, when does a remix become a new work?
Good question. So I always think about it with a thought experiment. You buy a 1990s Camaro and you start replacing parts. Once you've replaced everything, is your 90s Camaro still a 90s Camaro? Just kind of ship a Theseus. There's never going to be a clear answer to that. And at the end of the day, it's the contributor's call, what we call fiction. And here's mine. For our 353 haiku, we're going to ask AI to grow it into a 575. We're going to keep the message, keep as much of our wording as it can. And some parts will probably get swapped, but I think it's probably still going to come out like our Camaro. And because of that, we'll grow the same DARP record that we already wrote for our 353. And that's the call that I think most remixers will make because it keeps the whole provenance in one place. And at the end of the day, that call is ours to make. It's not a rule. And that's kind of the point. When researchers share a paper, the contributors decide exactly how their names appear. Every field does this 1,000 different ways, which is why this framework has to abstract and sit above all of them.
And attribution has kind of always worked this way, right? An honest fiction agreed upon by the people who did the work. The based on line points at the oldest credit in Western literature. And the librarian in me has to tell you, right? We don't actually know if Homer was one poet, many poets, a name attached to generations of singers, storytellers. The world agreed to write one name on it, and that credit has held for about 3,000 years in honest fiction.
So what does that mean in those 3,000 years? Attribution hasn't really changed, and DARP isn't going to change it either. It's there to give attribution a shape, one that holds whether the contributors are human, AI, or both. So let's go see if we can start swapping some parts. All right, one moment here. Let me see if I can get.
Yeah, we're going to reshare.
Okay.
And here I can stop sharing my screen just in case. There we go.
Okay. Let's see. 353. Oops. Apparently I can't type at all today. Do you have my screen, Victoria?
I do.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Alrighty. All right, so let's get a very specific prompt. So I am going to tell specifically, I'm working with a local Gemma 4 local model that just came out that's running on a computer here on our network. It's an Apache 2.0 model. And we're going to ask it to rewrite this from a 353 to a 575. And notice in the prompt here, I'm telling it to rewrite it, but also I'm telling it preserve the message and keep as much of the original wording as you can. And this is going to be important in a moment. So let's go ahead and let's highlight what we want it to change. And let's see if this works in real time.
Dun, dun, dun. And while that generates, let's notice what's happening. The model is adapting our poem, right? Not starting from scratch. The message carries through and hopefully most of our words with it. Just keep that in mind when we get to the
Let me step
credits.
up real quick. Go grab the, let me go grab the, one more time. Yes, I think we timed out. As always, everyone, this is what happens in real time when you try
Tech
to do
problems
something
when you're
fun.
on the spot, when you're live.
All right, so transparent.
Yes, correct spelling this time.
And our last, what was
ownership.
Our last one? Hopefully I can spell this one. Yeah, okay. Let's see if we can try this one more time. And if not, we will go to a backup. Alrighty, working on the draft. There we go. Okay, let's check it out. I've expanded the syllable counts to follow the 575. Transparent and clear. All is open, easy, real. Ownership is here. Okay, let's apply that. All right. I think that might be an adaptation. What do you think, Victoria? Are we ready to put it up to the group?
Yeah, let's actually check the work exactly the way that we checked our 353. So if you can review what Chris has and maybe if maybe paste it in chat just in case. I know some people said they were joining from their phone.
Absolutely. Let me get on that right now.
And if you can give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether we think this is a valid 575 haiku. Let's count the syllables and double check. Transparent and clear.
There's the chat. There you go.
Okay. I think I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, so we'll make it official. And we've officially, let's see. Oh, Shelly said I would push back on easy. Count is good, but reasoning doesn't fit with me. All right. So if we were like actually taking time and we wanted to edit the content, we could actually, we have contribution words that we could apply to that in DARP. We'll keep it simple and go more with just like, is it formatted, structured the right way, but knowing that we would definitely edit content with any more time. First line is redundant. Yeah, some content changes, but just for the purpose of this, we'll say it's final, move on. We've got it pasted in chat already. Awesome.
All right.
All right.
And posting.
All right. So let's give credit again. Same job as before, but with the 575 getting a little more nuanced, we'll get more specific into the DARP taxonomy and use the acts. Oh, and I do need to reshare. Thank you for stopping your screen and reminding me. Share. And I have lost some of my screen. There we go. If you can keep an eye on chat for me, Chris.
Yeah, I got it.
Awesome. I'm going to also post a link in chat as we go through this slide. I think, let's see, chat. There we go. This is a nifty little DARP Explorer tool that will help you better understand the taxonomy and the differences between the acts of contribution. Feel free to pull it up and click around or use the arrow keys on your keyboard to navigate while I explain. And we also have all of the act words just up on the screen. We just didn't have the space to dive into them as deeply. The acts sit below each DARP layer on page. And on the Explorer page, again, you'll notice explainers for each of these as we go through them. So under Devise, we have 3 acts: originator, shaper, and backer. Under author, we have maker, performer, adapter, curator. Under review, we have our reviewer, refiner, and verifier. And then under prepare, our finisher, distributor, and keeper.
So let's remember our Camaro conversation. Yeah, we had some questions about whether it could be better as a 575, but in general, the haiku is still there. I think there's enough there that it's still our Camaro, the same base work. So we have decided in our honest fiction that we don't need to write a new record. We can just watch our existing one grow. And so look at what changed and what didn't. The deviser's credit, Shelley's credit, didn't move. Their contribution is still in the work. Our message is intact, and most of the words made the trip, so the group is still on the record. And now we have the acts. We can say, or we can attribute precisely, we, the group, are the makers. We made the original exist. And we had one new line for the Gemma style tune, marked AI as our adapter. It turned the work into a new form that didn't exist before, using the same vocabulary as everyone else on the record. The group verified again, still under review. We posted again, prepare. And that's the rule. A record is a snapshot of whose contribution is in the work right now. The work changed, so the record grew to keep telling the truth. AI adapted, we made. Different acts, but the same layer, both true at the same time. And remember the two halves of the coin. Practical DARP, what we are practicing, credits the work as a whole, like we're doing here. Technical DARP is what follows our exact words through the remix, down to the character. When the work travels, that is a structured way to credit contribution as you see fit.
All right. And before we show you how people handle this today, let's define the word everyone is using. Disclosure means revealing something that would otherwise stay hidden. Its home is compliance, conflicts of interest, liability, risk. Nobody really discloses that they wrote a book. They're credited for it. So a disclosure asks, what do you have to admit? It never really asks just who made this. That's the difference between disclosing how you write and crediting how you actually work. So how do people attribute contributions from AI today? AI disclosure statements have become the norm and increasingly policy. In the open education world, ISKME recently posted OER Commons guidance on AI use for OER creation that expects all users to disclose or attribute AI when it has been used in the creation of the resource they're submitting, effective August 1st, so now. A recent OE Global blog post from Alan Levine on transparency of generative AI use in OE award nominations revealed that 92% of the 2025 nominations included a response to the generative AI transparency section of the nomination form, with about 69% disclosing some kind of use. And by asking how someone used AI rather than a binary yes/no question, we get more useful and informative answers like this one here on the right. And despite giving nominators the opportunity to properly disclose AI use, in his own personal blog, Cogdog the Blog, Alan laments a few cases of explicit non-disclosure. People expressing, I didn't use AI, despite a trail left behind like this one. And when disclosing costs you trust, people stop disclosing. And sometimes, as you can see, concealment leaves fingerprints.
So when we look at these top three disclosures, which earns your trust or which erodes it the least, look at where AI lives in each panel. In the top three, it's a confession box. In the fourth at the bottom, AI is just another line on the credit list. I believe that an AI-only disclosure is condescending. One contributor gets a confession box while everyone else gets a credit line. Equal contributors deserve one shared credit system, and that's what the DARP record shows. The same information as that whole anxious paragraph of a disclosure statement, structured so it can attach to any citation in any field. We're currently missing the format for honesty. There are solutions field by field, like the AID framework for OER by Amanda Gray, or building on Carrie Weaver's original, but nothing that works everywhere. And let's be honest about the elephant. People will always be suspicious of what AI wrote versus what a human wrote. DARP never asks anyone to stop being suspicious. It's very healthy. A disclosure statement tries to absolve suspicion. I confessed, now trust me. A record gives suspicion an address. Every claim on this panel has a name on it, and the reader stays the judge. The suspicion goes from AI touched it, so it's tainted, to I know what AI did, and I can make my own judgment based on my own scale. So credit, not confession, please. Let's stop disclosing and start crediting.
Absolutely.
Let me get this.
All right. So let's put this whole thing that we've been talking about together with a story that hopefully sounds familiar to many of you. Yes, thank you for that grand elephant in the room. If you can paste my little scenario in chat, Chris, and I'll go ahead and start chugging through.
1 second. This will be a two-parter in chat. Hang on. Boom, there we go.
There we go. All right. So familiar scenario. Let's say Maya, an instructor, designs a renewable assignment. Over the term, her intro environmental science class builds an open field guide to the local watershed, and the state OER repository will host it for other classes. Maya writes the profile structure and the rubric. She splits the class into small groups, each responsible for one habitat, and will follow the group that takes the wetland. Jordan researches and writes a great blue heron profile. Priya takes the cattail, Devin the muskrat, and Amara the bulrush. Priya wants her profile readable by younger students, so she asks Claude to draft a plain language edition of her finished profile and then edits that edition line by line. In class, the group trades profiles and gives each other honest feedback. Maya does a different pass, checking each profile against its cited sources. Felix, the class's layout lead, lays their section into the repository's accessible template. And Sana, the librarian, publishes the guide with an open license and metadata so the next class can find it and build upon it. All right. So you know the drill. They made the thing, so now we credit the thing.
So
over to you, Chris.
Yep. So under Devise, Maya, the instructor, came up with the assignment, the structure, the rubric. She decided what this thing would be. So she's our originator and our shaper. Under author, we would put Jordan, Priya, Devin, and Amara as our makers, 4 written profiles that didn't exist in September. And Claude is our adapter. Sound familiar? Same act we watched a few minutes ago. It turned Priya's finished profile into a plain language edition. Under review, each group member receives credit as a reviewer and a refiner, training honest feedback and applying the review notes back to the original written text. Maya, again, this time as verifier, checks every profile against its cited sources. And finally, under prepare, Felix, our class's finisher, fits the section into the accessible template. He's the mastering engineer of this piece, if you want to speak my language. Sana is our distributor, or what a newsroom would call the publisher. And the repository itself is the keeper. Keeping it reachable is the contribution. So 1 class project, 9 contributors, human and AI, every layer, and nobody needed a job title. And catch the last line of Victoria's story, so the next class can find it and build upon it or extend it. When next year's class adds to this guide, their record carries 1 line pointing back based on this one. That's our haiku again, just at full size.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. We told you at the start we wouldn't get to everything in the DARP taxonomy today. So that's what's waiting for you when you are ready to dive deeper. Trade words, just like they sound, are the words a field already uses for its own trades. A songwriter, a colorist, a peer reviewer. There are more than 150 of them right now mapped across 7 fields. Every one of them folds up to one of the 13 acts you use today, and then up again into the layers. So your field's own language and DARP's shared language don't clash. Scope words describe how much someone contributed when people share the same act: sole, lead, supporting, or equal. These 4 words can attach to contributions at any of the 3 levels of the taxonomy. And while we've worked freehand all session, there is a formal notation underneath everything we did today for when your work needs it. And something that we've heard across this conference is that people don't just want to know that AI was used, they want to know why, how. A DARP record can describe the act of AI's contribution, but the why, your reasoning, your insights, your pedagogy, that's the part that gets lost every time the work changes hands. So in the tools we're building for Common Frame, technical DARP's inline attribution isn't the only thing that travels with the work. The writer can leave their why right in the work, hidable or editable by the next contributor. Your why rides with the work as far as it reaches.
And we know that we cannot build these tools in a vacuum. So as we're building this infrastructure, we need your feedback. Working in music and entertainment, one thing you have to get very good at is both giving and receiving critical feedback. So we welcome it. Since criticism is how work actually gets better. Our goal is not just another standard out there with mild adoption. We want something that can take off and flourish, and that only happens if it can stand up to heavy constructive criticism. And that's the criticism we welcome and frankly require to do our best work for the commons. So keep exploring DARP after this session, please, and try to break it down. Take the work you shared in chat at the top, or a research article, or an OER you're co-authoring, and build its record. If you find a scenario the 4 layers can't hold, we want to hear about it.
Yeah. And our shot at our DARP record for this presentation. And again, with it being a taxonomy, it can be attributed at the layers, the acts, the trade words, maybe a mix in between. There are no hard and fast rules. Everything that we have shared today is kind of a guideline, and this is meant to be used for however the people using it need to, as with our honest fiction, accurately convey that credit as much as possible.
Yep. DARP is about trust, and however you write it to build that trust is what we want at the end of the day.
Absolutely. All right. And I'll go ahead and drop some of these resources that you're seeing on the screen in chat. See, and we want to thank you so much. Oops. We are there. I can send a message in chat. There we go. We really want to thank you for spending a little bit of your Saturday with us. You can download our session resources, the slides you see here from the link in chat. We've also dropped links to comment on DARP or propose a trade word from your own field. We're working on like OER. I think we already have academic on there, but if maybe you contribute in other aspects of your life, we'd love to hear that as well. We do read everything that comes in.
So in this same conversation, we're not done here. We're going to be continuing it this fall. If you happen to be at OE Global in person, come find us on Thursday, October 8th at our roundtable, Who Gets Credit When AI Shares the Work? A Provenance Conversation. And then just a little bit later at Open Ed 26, I'll be giving a lightning talk called Sowing Discord for Iterative Discovery, AI Roundtables Built on Friction, which is exactly as calm as it sounds.
And our open source tools are on their way to release, and we would especially love to hear from you if you're thinking about human AI attribution, AI literacy, or local first learning. You can reach out to us at hello@clearbox.org or through the form on our site.
So as we wrap up here on Monday, or the next time a piece of creative work leaves your hands, you don't need our tools or formal notation or anyone's permission. Grab a pencil, write it down, and you'll start to recognize the layers in your own work, in your students, and everything made around you. And I really hope that once you see them, they will transform how you approach collaboration and then approach how you try to use AI.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, everyone. I know we're just at about time. I don't know if we have time for any questions, or again, you're welcome to connect with us after this since we only have about a minute left. I'll turn it back over to Ronald.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we have time for one quick question, but real quick, let's put some reactions in the chat. That was great. I know I'll say when I saw you submit your proposal and it said Clearbox, we were like, oh, I hope they're not over here trying to sell us anything. Instead, you just gave us a wonderful way to think about how we can credit work and all the different stages. I really love it. I know our English faculty, Deanna Faraday, was also reviewing, and she was like, "Oh, this is great. I wanna use this. I'm gonna try to figure out how I could use this in my course next quarter." So really great work.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for sharing. Actually, yeah, let's see. I'm already kind of late from the previous one, so let's go ahead and end it there. If you all have questions for Victoria or Chris, You can feel free to reach out to them. They left their connect information in the chat. And we have one more, everybody. We are surprisingly at the end of the AI OER Institute. We have one more session after this. So I'm going to put the link in the chat to join the lobby again. And thank Chris and Victoria one more time. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having us
Thank you
so
all
much.
so much. Fantastic audience, lots of participation. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. And we hope to connect with some of y'all soon.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.